Welcome to The Visionary Entrepreneur. My name is Dane Dunlap.
And I'm Nicholas Genovese.
This is a podcast where we interview entrepreneurs about their story and visions for the future. We're here to create a space to network and to learn from each other's experiences.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode. Today we had the pleasure of interviewing Daniel Koffler, who we were referred to by Ryan Alovis, who was actually one of our previous guests. We found Daniel's company really interesting. He founded New Frontiers, which is an executive, almost life coaching platform. They do academics and tutoring and things like that, but they also help kids and adults to, with transitions in their life, and whether that be organizing yourself or finding your passion or even finding your career that fits you. That's what his platform does. So we talked to him today about what he thinks the future of education is. How do you continuously educate yourself as an adult, which is extremely important nowadays, and a lot about organizational culture. So, how to kind of be a good leader, and how do you know that you're in a company with a good organizational culture. So really cool episode. Hope you guys enjoy. Daniel, thank you so much for being on with us.
Morning. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. So we wanted to just get right into it, and obviously you have your company, New Frontiers, and with executive coaching, and you guys do a whole range of stuff, from tutoring and helping people through transitions in life. One of the questions I had was, if someone is struggling, if someone is lost, unsure, Nick and I have been there in our lives, going through a transition between being a student athlete to, okay, we're in the real world now, what do we do? What's the first step to you? What's your advice to that person?
So don't be afraid to ask for help, right? I think that there's a very, in my view, strange misconception in the world that asking for help is a sign of weakness, and even more so, receiving help is a real designator of weakness. And it's just not true. As athletes, I'm sure you guys can appreciate, you've had coaches for your entire athletic career, and I would imagine you took their guidance seriously, both on and off the field of play. So, the same thing applies in life. We're not, just because we are expected to do a whole range of things in the course of our day and our life does not mean that we are imbued with the skills to do so. You have to learn that,
Right. So do you think that people don't know that they need help, or do you think they're just too afraid to ask?
I think it's some version of the latter. I mean, but then again, in fairness, people is everybody. So there's a bunch of shades of gray. There are some who literally don't know that asking for help is an option. Some who understand that they can, and they even know who to go to, but for fear of being told, but we already covered that. We already went over that already. Like, why would you not know that after one time covering it? Or something like that. I think people just can be very turned off after an initial negative experience seeking help. And it can just create a very fractured foundation from which to kind of grow from. So, and we've seen both of those instances and many other, iteratives in between. So I think people are generally just uncomfortable asking for help because I think it's a perception of weakness. I think it comes back to that.
So what else would you say, someone is struggling, they maybe they don't know what their passion is, they don't know what to pursue next in their career. What else do you think, besides asking for help, might be something that would help them out?
Well, I mean, advice that I would give, and that I've kind of, took a very long time to to comprehend myself, is don't expect to know all the answers, right? When I was coming out of college, I had no idea what I wanted to do in my life. I fell into a career, and I've really come to love it and enjoy it, and I find a lot of value in doing the work that I do, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. And at 22, I think it's incredible for the folks who you see these kids who when they're 14, they know they want to be neuroscientists, and it's remarkable. I applaud that. But I think that is the minority of people. I think that I think that social media, has positive and negative influences in this whole thing, and it's impossible to not kind of incorporate that into the thought process, because these days it's just everywhere. But it's not a four-letter word to not know what you want to do, even though society and your parents and whoever else wants you to know what you want to do. How would you really know what it means to do the job that you're going to end up doing if you haven't actually done it? And doing it even for 6 months is not really enough time, because you could have a really nice period of 6 months or a really negative 6 month period. You really have to kind of test the waters in these things. And I think that people lose sight of that and to their detriment.
That it's
Don't be
okay to
afraid. Yeah, don't be afraid to say I don't know.
to to try things and fail at it and be like, okay, that's not for me, or try something else. Because I feel like a lot of people they like that when they want to look into something, they just start researching, reading articles, but they don't actually just go and do things for themselves and try it out. And, oh, okay, well, that didn't work. Let me try something else. People are too scared of doing that.
Yeah, I think people also feel like, time is of the essence. And if I don't like establish myself right now in this career, I'm not going to have that path to partner or whatever, the reward that one, perceives it to be, without understanding what's involved in that journey, which is, it might not be for you at all. It might be wonderful for your parents or your friends might really find a lot of value in that, but it really just might not be for you. And I think society have done a tremendous job of convincing people that you must do, like you can either make a living or live. And I don't think it has to be one or the other, right? I think that you should be you can do both simultaneously. It may be more difficult. It might not be, but you owe it to yourself to at least try, especially in your kind of younger days when you have a little more flexibility than you might recognize you actually do have.
Little question. You said you fell into your career.
Yeah.
What was the first? How did you fall into your career? I didn't understand that part.
Yeah, so it's a good question. My family is in the education business. My mother's a speech therapist by training. My mother and father built a school 30-something years ago to support individuals, preschool age children with developmental disabilities. That is a pretty niche business in and of itself. It turned into a rather large business of building and operating for-profit private schools in and around New York City. The business that I run is an offshoot of one of those schools, or it's a response to one of the problems that we were not able to solve at the school. The school was a program for students with learning differences and just other kind of like unconventional learning styles. With a sort of smaller, student to staff ratio in the classroom, we had related services as part of the program, so like speech therapy, occupational therapy. And what was happening was kids were approaching graduation, and the intention of that program was that you graduate and you move on to college, as is the intention of most K-12 programs. And parents were approaching us and saying, listen, we're concerned about what's going to happen to our sons and daughters when they transition from here to college. And, parenthetically, there's all these expectations that are kind of foisted upon an individual in college. They're not really well defined, they're not really well explained to the student. And how are we going to manage this? How are we going to help our sons and daughters manage this? How are they going to manage this? And we came up with this approach, this individualized coaching model that aims to address the matters at hand. So if it's an academic challenge or if it's a social challenge, whatever the issue at hand is.
So it's like a life coaching.
Very much so.
Service.
Yeah, in simple terms, yes, it mimics that. Yeah, very much.
So what we realized is traditional education system is very much based on the past, and that you learn things in college or in high school, whatever was the norm 30 years ago or 50 years ago or 100 years ago, depending on the subject, really. Both of us studied finance, but very rarely you educate yourself for the future. What would you say? How can you educate yourself for the future to be prepared for what's to come? What do you have anything on that?
It's a good question. I'll tell you just me personally, I learned the most important lessons of my life that I still are foundational things from literally like playing poker and pool with my friends in high school. And then, fast forward a little bit and, reading. It's like finding subject matters that I enjoyed reading about, which at least opened me up to reading, like lifelong learning. I think it's kind of like the ultimate answer to the question, but I can dig in a little bit. So it started off reading about things that were, I enjoyed true crime and politics and things like that. That kind of exposed me to, maybe some self-help books and professional development books. And now I read kind of across the spectrum. That to me, what you learn in school, like some stuff is fundamental and foundational, and that's important. And I think a college degree is still very important for a variety of reasons. The journey getting it, as well as the information that you kind of gain while getting it. But you can't just stop there. And these days, I think the challenge is like understanding the signal from the noise, because there's so much information. It's essentially like drinking out of a fire hose when you try to digest the morning news. And then now, like the interesting twist of 2020 is people have, their own interpretation of the news or their own version of the news. It's a strange thing that makes it really difficult, I think, for a young person in particular, to kind of like grasp like what's real and what should they kind of latch onto. But I think, I mean, reading to me is the answer. I think you can't expect to kind of check the box of learning once you graduate formal education. You have to be comfortable and prepared to continuously learn and read, because somewhere in there is the key to the question you're asking. Like, how do I grasp the future? How do I continuously kind of stay ahead of the trends? You know, there's some very bright thinkers out there who put out some very interesting content, and you have to kind of find those avenues, and I think part of that journey and finding out, you know, who you enjoy reading and what you enjoy getting from them is part of it. I can give my suggestions of like what I read and like what's useful, but the next person might find it completely just like unproductive. So you kind of have to go through that process, I think.
Yeah, I feel that whenever I get a suggestion by someone and I force myself to read it and it's not for me, then I just don't get as much out of it as even something simple like a fiction book, you know, that I feel like it doesn't really, is on paper not teaching me anything, but then I come out of it, I'm like, oh, I feel like I learned a good amount, you know. But kind of a side thing that I was just thinking about is I know you help people, you know, with habits and, you know, organizing your life maybe a little bit better. And it kind of makes me think, you know, there's the way of how to study and what you're studying, but then there's also things that can make you more productive while you're studying, you know, like the certain habits you do in your daily life. So how important do you think, you know, your daily habits, how you go about life, how you think about it, is important versus, you know, how many hours you're putting into educating yourself or what you're studying? You know, where's the balance there?
You can be an expert in economics, you can be an expert in whatever kind of subject matter. If you don't have the soft skills to like just get up in the morning, make your bed, brush your teeth, do your chores, it might seem like a meaningless kind of concept, but there's a reason why that's generally imbued, or used to be imbued, in children growing up, because like you have to be comfortable with the mundane to be able to get over that mundane to get to the next level. I think it's critical. I think, and for me personally, routine is how I run my life. Everyone's got their own kind of comfort level with different systems, and it's really important to figure out what systems work well for you to be successful. And that's the crux of our work, is helping develop, understanding what systems work for the individual and developing those systems in a way that they don't need us to kind of help scaffold them. We can build up that scaffold and then remove it as they get more comfortable enacting those things on their own.
Can you expand on, you said, you know, you have to get over the mundane to get to the next level. Can you kind of expand on what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, think about reading. It's going back to that example. Like, you know, you want the information, you have to absorb the information. There's only a couple, I mean, these days you can listen to an audiobook, there's ways to do it, but you have to kind of get over that. You know, it's not the Matrix, essentially, where they can like just jam a cord into your head and like, you know how to fly a helicopter. As cool as that would be, this is not how, we're not there yet. So you hit to a point where you're like, all right, the pain point is real enough that I'm going to stop convincing myself that I don't have to do this, because there's no other way out of this. Like, you just have to do the work. So that, I mean, I think that it's one of those things that's a very simple concept to understand. It's not as easy to actually enact it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that 100%, because you talked about the pain point, and I find when I force myself to do certain habits every day, I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta meditate. Someone told me I have to meditate, so I have to do it. It doesn't provide as much benefit as when 2 weeks later I stop meditating, and then I'm like, wow, I had a pretty shitty week, you know? And then I'm like, maybe I should go back to doing it. You know, I feel the pain point and I go back to it, you know? So I think that really resonates.
But it's also interesting because, you know, and this is kind of where the rubber meets the road with the coach, because it's one thing to hold yourself accountable. And if you can do that, that's phenomenal. But not everybody's there when they kind of want to be or need to be at that place where they can hold themselves accountable for the different activities or kind of goals they're looking to achieve. A coach can really help be that third party who has really no interest for themselves except to see you be successful. And they can hold you accountable. And it's like going to a gym class or anything where there's like, you know, like a social dynamic to it. There's an accountability built in to being present, to actually showing up. And that you don't want to let the person down. Mm-hmm. You want to do the best you can. I work out by myself now, you know, these days, and it's just not as powerful as it was when I was, you know, in a group. So and the same thing applies to academics, to career support, to almost anything that I can think of.
I think one problem about this whole mundane and discipline in our society is to recognize what is beneficial and what is not beneficial for your personal growth. Like, is it a job that you're stuck in and you're just running the hamster wheel, or is it a job that might suck right now but is going to help you out in the long run? Like, you're actually learning and have a lot of personal growth in what you're doing. So how do you know? Do you have any suggestions, like, to realize whether or not you're on the right track?
That's a tough one, right? It's like, the old say, like, the journey is the destination. It's, you don't always know. And the people who you look to, who your parents, your teachers, your advisors, they don't know either. They know what they know, but they don't know what, how this is going to play out for you. I think you just have to look around with the information you have at the moment in front of you, and like what your understanding of the future will be, which is impossible to predict, but and make a decision and be confident in that decision, understanding that you can't handicap it 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could talk all day about this topic, and I really enjoy it. But I know another one of the things that you like to focus on is, organizational culture and how to best, kind of guide through the best practices for, good workplace environment. So for me, my question is, when you're looking at an organization, what really sticks out as, these are attributes of a good or a bad organizational culture?
So I do believe that it starts at the top, right? Leadership is, a trickle down concept. But at the same time, it requires buy-in from your team. So I may, do what I do, wake up early, stay organized a certain way, like do certain, exhibit certain behaviors that might be applicable to kind of the managers who work with me. But if they don't buy in to those things, and I can't force them to, they have to really kind of want it and see the value of it and understand. For example, like in a sales environment, if you're making 150 calls a day, and it's like, and you're getting kind of not a lot of, positive feedback, sometimes it's just part of the deal. Like, you just have to like a struggle through that kind of experience. But I think seeing that occur at the leadership levels is really important. For us, what we've done, and I spend a lot of time, I look at other organizations, but I've really make a concerted effort to just put the blinders on, and focus on like what's happening in my shop. Only I can control, the outcomes, even if I to say that I can control them, but only I can kind of help shape the outcomes within my organization.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you have to be extremely diligent to stay true to it. I was a captain of the tennis team. Nick was the assistant coach at one point of the tennis team, and it's not easy to really get on people and stay true to a culture, because that's really what you're building on a small team. And I think that people kind of overlook that aspect. Everyone just says culture, but unless it's truly defined and truly stuck to it on like almost like a rule-based kind of thing, then you're just not going to stay true to it.
I'll just tell you, for what it's worth, on our team, we hired a coach. We have a professional implementer of this process working with us. And I think we're getting to the point that, there will be a point in time, and which I think is part of his design as well, that we don't need him. Like,
right.
The idea of a coach is to get you to a certain point, and then kind of off you go as you've made the progress that you need to make to kind of run these systems on your own. So he understands that. We've all discussed that from the beginning, but there is no way we would have dug deep enough and really exposed, not the rot, but for lack of a better term, like the rot in the foundation that has to be kind of like cleaned up, cleaned out, and then rebuilt to grow from.
So you sort of said 2 or 3 key attributes to a good company culture, which is stay true to your culture and work as a team. And do you have any other keys that are really important to a successful company culture?
Yeah, there's 2 big ones, and they derive from work with the team. But I think trust and communication are the 2. I think that when you're running a business, especially if you own the business, if you're an equity owner, it's your money, and you feel that, and you can be sensitive to things. You might micromanage how money's spent, or etc. That's not okay, but you have to, at some point, if you do want to grow, let go. You have to trust your team to make the right decisions and trust them to treat the money like it's their own. My team does that, which is incredible. And they still, for what it's worth, ask for permission to make like small purchases just out of respect for the process, but they know they have my blessing.
Yeah, I think having a good culture sort of helped you as a smaller business or as a startup to be more efficient and more happy while you're working. But just like we see in tennis, the most profitable companies, I'm sure they think that, oh yeah, money or profits are just going to overcome any team culture. And at the end of the day, I don't think that's going to make you fulfilled, but it might still make you rich.
Well, it's funny. Did you guys watch The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary?
No.
I watched parts of it, but not the whole
Oh,
thing.
it's a good one. And it's a really good example because most people who are casual sports fans or casual basketball fans think, Michael Jordan, championship, success, right? He has a reputation well earned as like a real hard ass. And, in some respects you'd say, well, listen, like that's what it takes to be like the top of your game of all time and your legacy lives on. But, and maybe it doesn't matter to you how many relationships get impacted negatively because of that drive. Um, but I happen to think it does matter. And that metaphor, it translates to the business world, I think very directly. And I've written about it actually, about how important I think that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have that mindset of I don't care how many people I trample along the way, as long as I can get to where I need to be. But I don't think it's a very fulfilling way to live your life. I think it's better to do it where, like you said, you're the pursuit of happiness and helping others along the way. And I think what you guys do, through helping others, but also being able to obviously sustain your own business, I think that's a great way to live your life.
It's working for us, right? And I think that some people, some people like the act of trampling people and like seeing, like this like very kind of like zero sum game where like I win and you lose. It's just a different perspective that I have, and I think that many people have, and I think that it's one. It goes in the same vein as like seeking help. I think people have been trained to understand like you must kill, like killers kill. So like go out there and like just like rip their throats out, and that's exhausting. Like I honestly, it's exhausting. It doesn't mean that don't work hard. Don't. It's two different things, but just like that, the negative approach to things. It just doesn't. I don't think that you can live that way healthily. I think at some point you'll have actual health problems, mental health, physical health. It's just too much stress on your body. I mean, and it's like we've done a lot of research in the last, period of time that kind of like you talk about meditation. Like these kind of things are not, hokey Eastern, like things that aren't compatible with the Western approach to life. People have really confused these concepts. And in fairness, there's been some people, some vocal minorities who have taken it to a certain direction that have, made it seem a little hokey for these different things. But the reality is like the science and like the health benefits are indisputable.
I agree 100%. I think it's been great just to kind of pick your brain about, education, but also what makes a culture work. I think it's so important for people to hear, especially not only people who are starting a small business, but anyone who's working, in a big company, small company, it doesn't matter. I think all this stuff applies to be constantly learning. So we really appreciate you taking the time and talking to us today. I think we learned a lot.
This is great, guys. I really appreciate the platform. I'm happy to expand on any of this stuff at any time. If any listeners who have any questions, I'm very easily contactable, I should say. But I love this stuff. I mean, we really do live it. And I do find that talking about it actually helps me reframe my thinking about it. So I appreciate the opportunity and happy to talk about it anytime.
Definitely. I mean, Dane and my goal was always to educate ourselves, the two of us, through this podcast, and this was very helpful because it was sort of a hybrid between what we're trying to do and you being an entrepreneur and teaching us sort of a few tips. And I don't know if you were able to see any of the other episodes, but we sort of always shoot an episode and then try and implement all the tips that each entrepreneur gives us on how to do things.
It's a very noble effort you guys are doing here. I think that reading is a thing I've mentioned a couple times, but listening also, like listening to people and kind of like taking their feedback is difficult to do, but really important. My good friend, a long-time friend of mine, Ryan Alovis, was a previous guest on the podcast. That's how I learned about that. I saw his presentation, which I thought was excellent. I was like, these guys are cool guys, like with a really kind of like, the right approach to this. And I was excited when we were connected to be able to do this.